Right now, if you look at India's foreign policy, it looks pretty confident. India has been able to get some big foreign policy wins in the Middle East.
What was once considered impossible has become a reality. A grand Hindu temple now stands tall in Abu Dhabi. It's a matter of pride for India and the UAE.
आज अबू धाबी में भव्य और दिव्य मंदिर का लोकार्पण हो रहा है.
Without the intervention of Prime Minister Modi, it wouldn't have been. आज हम आपके सामने खड़े नहीं हो रहे होते.
But it wasn't always like this.
Nixon and his assistant for national security affairs, Henry Kissinger, even encouraged China, a long-standing ally of Pakistan, to mobilize its armed forces along its border with India.
These Indians, yuck, pathetic. That is Richard Nixon as President of America.
When one American diplomat suggested cutting off aid to Pakistan to stop the genocide, Nixon put it bluntly, "I wouldn't do that to help the Indians. The Indians are no goddamn good." What Indians really need, Nixon said, is a mass famine. The United States even made an implicit threat toward India not to intervene by moving a nuclear aircraft carrier into the Bay of Bengal on the coast of Bangladesh.
Today, we're going to review the last 10 years of Indian foreign policy, and we're going to look at how India went from constantly getting embarrassed by the likes of Pakistan to having a self-confident and a rather strong foreign policy. The Indian nation and the Indian civilization has always had a very strong idea of how to deal with foreign countries. In fact, the Prime Minister of Chandragupta Maurya of the Magadha Empire and a famous strategist, Kautilya, gave 6 forms of diplomacy. Sandhi, which is a peace treaty. It is an agreement between 2 states to end hostilities and cooperate for mutual benefit. Chandragupta Maurya's alliance with Seleucus Nicator by marrying his daughter was an example of a peace treaty or Sandhi. Vigraha, war. It is the use of military force to defeat or subjugate another state. Asana, neutrality. It can be adopted when the state is weak, isolated, or threatened by a stronger enemy. Yana, marching. It can be used to intimidate or provoke the enemy or to secure a strategic position. King Harsha's expedition to the Deccan is an example of Yana. Samasraya, alliance. It is friendship with another state. For example, the alliance of the Shunga dynasty with the Indo-Greek kings. Dvayadibhava, double dealing. It means making peace with one state and waging war with another. The Gupta Empire followed this policy towards the Huns and the Vakataks. Kautilya always proposed a changing and adaptable foreign policy. India's foreign policy at that time was determined by interests and objectives of the ruling dynasties and their relations with other states, depending upon the strength of each nation. Sadly, these strategies would be forgotten for nearly 70 years of India's independence.
The nation that Mr. Nehru got, it had a perfectly well-functioning bureaucracy, a massive navy, a really battle-hardened army, a great police force. This nation could have risen very fast.
Are you going to ask for a financial loan for India at this conference?
We have our dealings with the UK government, as other governments in financial matters. We normally have been asking for credit for purchases, and this kind of thing goes on between our finance ministry and the UK government.
As more countries became free, we, the non-aligned, have chosen peace, which surely is the right and inevitable choice.
India's foreign policy, for at least 60 years after independence, was more confused than a non-Indian guy watching an Indian soap opera. For example, let's take a look at India-United States relations. India-US relations actually started on a decent footing. In the latter half of the 1940s, the Truman administration of the United States tended to prefer India over neighboring Pakistan because, according to them, India possessed greater diplomatic significance and was a better long-term bet, as it turned out.
Arriving at the White House, the leader of more than 400 million Indians receives a warm welcome from President and Mrs. Eisenhower, who are on the porch of the executive mansion to greet him.
I extend to you the hospitality and goodwill of the people of the United States, with the hope that your visit among us will leave you with a firm conviction that we are indeed your warm friends.
Today, India is on its way to becoming the 3rd largest economy in the world in just a few years, while Pakistan is in competition with Joe Biden to see who can completely crumble first.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to do whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit and not say what I'm really thinking.
At that moment in time, India received a lot of assistance from the United States in terms of defense, space, technology, etc. But Prime Minister Nehru, who perhaps rightly was concerned about the reliability of Western powers, after 150 years of occupation and loot by a Western country, he decided to follow a non-aligned policy. The non-aligned policy in a nutshell was that India will not be aligned towards either of the major powers, either the United States or the Soviet Union. India chooses to be neutral and look after its own interests first and foremost. Which, that's not a bad policy in theory, but in practice, unfortunately, it was something else. Much like the promise of Brahmastra the movie and the delivery of Brahmastra the movie.
Shiva, 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 Shiva.
In reality, India was more or less aligned towards the Soviet Union. Nehru was highly influenced by Fabian communism and socialism. He chose a path for India that was built on socialist principles. Nehru didn't criticize the Soviet occupation of Hungary in 1956 in the United Nations, which resulted in a souring of relationship between India and the US. Nehru's non-aligned movement was somewhat of a lie. Much like when the director of Bajirao Mastani tells you that they've been very true to the story of Peshwa Bajirao, and when you go watch the movie, instead of focusing fully on Peshwa Bajirao's military career, we spent 1.5 hours on a bullshit love triangle. The US had also offered India to join the Southwest Asia Treaty Organization, or SEATO, which were US-led regional security alliances formed in the 1950s to contain the spread of communism in Asia. India again rejected this alliance due to non-alignment reasons. India did not join the Baghdad Pact, which was a regional security alliance formed in 1955. It was formed by Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, and the UK, and later joined by the United States. Relations further soured during the Nixon era in the United States. Nixon was the 37th president of the United States between 1969 and 1974. He saw the relations with India souring and established a very close relationship with Pakistan, aiding it militarily and economically to create Pakistan as a counterweight to both the Soviet Union and India in Asia. He had a very negative view of Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The Indira-Nixon legacy on Indo-US relations was one of mistrust, resentment, and missed opportunities. To be fair to Prime Minister Nehru, the Soviets and Russia afterwards has always been a pretty decent ally of India. In 1953, India and the Soviet Union signed their first trade agreement, which laid the groundwork for future economic cooperation. And ever since then, Russia and India have been pretty close strategic allies. Russia helped India during the 1971 India-Pakistan war. Russia has been one of India's biggest arms suppliers. But unfortunately, this is where the positive aspects of foreign policy end. After the partition, Pakistan launched a tribal militia attack to forcibly annex Kashmir. While the Indian army was on track to repel the militia attack, remove the Pakistani invaders, and reclaim the entire Jammu and Kashmir.
हमने बांग्लादेश बनाया 14 दिन के अंदर पाकिस्तान के 2 टुकड़े करे आज उसी विजय दिवस का हम जश्न मना रहे हैं
Prime Minister Nehru called for a ceasefire and chose to take the matter to the UN because instead of solving the problem through a quick military battle, he wanted to look to the world like a statesman who would rather solve this issue through international diplomacy. Sardar Patel vehemently opposed this move. He believed that this was an internal matter that should be solved through a quick battle, and no foreign body like the UN has the right to intervene in India's internal affairs. Sardar Patel even met Maharaja Hari Singh and even obtained his signature that the matter should not be referred to the UN. But Nehru ignored all voices and approached the United Nations, and basically, much like India in the 2023 World Cup, snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And since then, the matter of the Pakistani occupation of part of Jammu and Kashmir remains resolved to this day, nearly 75 years later.
Merits of India's case got lost in power politics, despite the fact that Kashmir's accession to India was lawful and that Pakistan was no match to India's military prowess in the ongoing war. Simply put, India shot itself in the foot.
शायद सजेशन दिया कि ये मामला अदरवाइज सुधरेगी नहीं, आप यूएन लेके चलो, यूएन लेके गए, इंटरनेशनलाइज बना दिया, उसको आज तक हमारे पड़ोसी दुरुपयोग कर रहा है.
And we have seen countless deaths at the hands of Pakistani-sponsored terrorists in Kashmir, including the genocide of the Kashmiri Hindus. And unfortunately, this trend of shooting themselves in the foot continued for Indian leaders after Nehru as well. If you take the War of 1971, for example, in which the Indian army recorded a massive victory over Pakistan and divided the country into 2 parts.
How a cry of anguish made India help set a nation free. How a mighty set of heroes achieved India's greatest military victory.
Indira Gandhi at that time had a golden opportunity to retrieve Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. But instead of doing so, she met with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1972 and signed the Shimla Agreement, where she for some reason decided to cease the war and froze the ceasefire border instead of taking the entire Jammu and Kashmir. It's like if a Playboy model invites you over to her house to party and you tell her, no, I'm good actually. I have an assignment I need to finish by next week, so I better get started on it right now. Are you out of your mind, you nerd?
Your intellect is as weak as your dollar. You are made of stupid.
It gave Pakistan an opportunity to rebuild its military and continue supporting militants in Kashmir. Even after Indira Gandhi, successive Congress regimes continued to coddle Pakistan. Even as recently as 2009, after numerous devastating terror attacks, including the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, instead of acting against terror and demanding accountability from Pakistan, India went to a conference with Pakistan at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt and declared a joint statement where they decided that both India and Pakistan were victims of terror. It was such a shameful statement that even the left-leaning India Today called the statement a surrender by India to Pakistan. Basically, India acted as the guy who says to his wife that you can cheat on him as many times as you want and with as many guys as you want, and it won't affect their relationship at all. I mean, can you be more of a beta? India's foreign policy towards China has been equally bad. Nehru declined offers from the United States and the Soviet Union to replace China at the UN Security Council. He said he doesn't want to antagonize China, doesn't want to have any conflict with China. Again, the wanting to be a statesman disease. And India relinquished its potential seat at the UN Security Council and gave it to China instead. And shockingly, Nehru's goal of achieving cordial relations with China remains unachieved to this day. In response, China used to mock Nehru. They used to call Nehru as a lackey of the British. China published a map in 1964 in Beijing showing the northeastern edge of Jammu and Kashmir as Aksai Chin. Despite clear indications of China's evil intentions, Jawaharlal Nehru persisted in safeguarding the illusion of the Chini-Hindi brothership.
प्रधानमंत्री जवाहरलाल नेहरू को 12 साल तक आगाह किया जाता रहा कि चीन की नीयत ठीक नहीं है। चीन से हमें सतर्क रहना होगा। लेकिन नेहरू ने किसी की बात नहीं सुनी। उन्होंने अपने कमांडर इन चीफ की सलाह को भी हवा में उड़ा दिया।
This brotherhood is basically as real as your belief that the Instagram influencer whose posts you like every single day is actually interested in you. Even when China launched a war against India in 1962, according to experts, India lost that war because of Nehru's delay in engaging the Air Force. Even when China captured Aksai Chin in 1962, Nehru said he had no interest in taking that land back because not a single blade of grass grows there. When it comes to the Middle East, India has always maintained a distance from the goings-on in the Middle East, especially due to its non-aligned status. Even if you look at Israel, Israel has always been a very dependable partner for India. But because they wanted to appease the Arab world, India always maintained a certain distance from Israel. Indira Gandhi once said,
We are of one mind in our support for the brave, homeless, and much harassed Palestinian people. Israel feels free to commit any outrage, unabashed in its aggression, unrepentant about its transgressions of international law and behavior.
India was always hesitant to support Israel, even though Israel has always supported India on important issues. In fact, India even refused to recognize Israel as a sovereign country before 1950. But after 2014, there has been a significant shift in India's foreign policy. India rejected the policy of keeping a safe distance from Israel. Prime Minister Modi became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. On top of that, Obama was invited to attend India's 2015 Republic Day parade. According to the Indian Express, this was a move which ended the last vestige of anti-Americanism in Indian polity. In fact, Prime Minister Modi is seen in foreign policy circles to be the most pro-America leader India has ever had. The big change for India was that post-2014, India didn't see the world as a bipolar world anymore with just two power centers. India realized that we are moving towards a multipolar world where there are multiple power centers across the entire world, including China, the Middle East, as well as India. And so a multipolar foreign policy was necessary, where a relationship must be built and maintained with all these different centers of power. The important thing for India was to do what was best for all Indian people. India was now reaching out strongly to its neighbors for cooperation.
India also prioritized relations with Maldives, Nepal and Bhutan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visits to these countries further solidified the bonds of friendship and cooperation.
Modi developed a very strong relationship with ex-Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. Much more focus and attention was given to India's eastern neighbors under Modi's Act East policy. Modi advocated for the strengthening of BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC, for those who don't know, is an organization of countries bordering the Bay of Bengal. Not only did India become much more pro-America under Modi and pro its Southeast Asian neighbors, but Modi also had a very engaged policy for the Middle East.
Excellent program, excellent, everything. Very grateful for your speech. It was amazing, excellent.
A report from the New Arab says that India has become a strong player in Arab negotiations. Earlier, India used to stay away from the Arab world, but that has now changed under Prime Minister Modi. India is also now part of the IMEC corridor, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which is a very important strategic economic corridor for the entire Middle East.
The India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of IMEC and those who have joined it. There is India, of course, and then we have the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the European Union, France, Italy, Germany, and the United States. These are some of the most powerful nations in the world, and they have come together to secure supply chains.
Apart from this, India will also be part of the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor.
The visit is part of the 12th India-Japan Annual Dialogue, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Shinzo Abe would also launch the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor.
India is also part of the I2U2.
Leaders of the United States, Israel, India and the UAE held a virtual summit, a first for the newly formed bloc called I2U2. The maiden summit focused on joint projects for bolstering economic cooperation under the coalition's framework. The leaders talked about the conceptualization, vision, and the key agenda of the grouping.
The result of building such a strong relationship with the Middle Eastern countries are clear to see. Recently, Qatar released 8 Indian ex-Navy personnel who were on death row under the charge of espionage. In fact, relations have improved to such an extent that a grand Hindu temple was inaugurated this month in the UAE by Prime Minister Modi. This is an event that was thought to be as impossible as watching Instagram reels without any cringe at all. This was obviously considered a massive win for Indian diplomacy. India is also expanding its diplomacy through economic means. India is involved in building various projects, including the Chabahar port in Iran to get better connectivity with Afghanistan.
India was still, by the way, investing in Chabahar because of the larger geopolitical interest, also because that was a route into Afghanistan.
India is building the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline for easier access to gas. And India is now getting a large amount of benefit from developing such a multifaceted foreign policy. India was able to maintain friendly relations with Russia even during the Russia-Ukraine war, which saved Indians $3.3 billion in just the first half of the financial year 2024. India has been able to maintain friendly relations with Russia while avoiding sanctions from the United States. Along with it, the Indian foreign policy has started to show a bit of a spine and a bit of an edge. Take the Doklam standoff for that matter.
Doklam Plateau, a parcel of land claimed by Bhutan and China. Agreements dating back to 1988, 1989 and 2012 bind all sides to do nothing after the status quo on the ground until the dispute is settled. China, in an attempt to control Doklam, tried to build a road through the disputed territory. India is committed by an agreement to come to Bhutan's aid when its security is threatened. That India and China have agreed to an expeditious disengagement of border personnel, the Chinese claim that they will continue to patrol the region.
India was able to abrogate Article 370 without any significant international backlash.
No previous government acted on Kashmir was because of the fear of repercussions perhaps, but the decision itself was not a sudden one. Abrogation of Article 370 was part of the BJP's 100-day agenda. The party got a powerful mandate in this Lok Sabha election in 2019, just a couple of months back, and now it has used it. This decision was something that the BJP has been promising for decades.
While maintaining a friendly relationship with Russia, India is also part of the Quad, a grouping led by the United States to counter China.
The Dragon's designs have jeopardized security in the Indo-Pacific. China has refused to respect internationally accepted maritime laws, challenged the rules-based order, claimed some islands, built artificial ones. Basically, China has become a threat to peace in the Indo-Pacific, and this is where the Quad comes in.
India has also taken a very strong stance against Canada, which has become a hub of anti-India Khalistani activities. Along with Canada, the crown jewel of India's foreign policy has been its relationship, or lack thereof, with Pakistan. Before 2014, whenever you spoke of India, you had to include Pakistan in that discussion. India has managed to make Pakistan completely irrelevant whenever discussing about India. A surgical strike was done in Pakistan in 2016, and airstrike was done in 2019 by the Indian Air Force on Pakistani soil after the Pakistanis orchestrated a terrorist attack in Pulwama in Kashmir. All this happened with minimal international condemnation. In fact, the former United States National Security Advisor justified it. France supported India. Unknown gunmen have been headshotting Pakistani terrorists like they're Leon Edwards. When Article 370 was removed, Pakistan raised a gigantic hue and cry about it. In fact, even certain sections in India and certain political parties raised a giant hue and cry about it, but the international community largely supported India. The UAE said the decision was India's internal matter. Saudi Arabia called for a peaceful settlement in accordance with relevant international resolutions, which is basically diplomatic speak for saying, I don't give a shit, do whatever you want to do. The United States was extremely careful and nuanced in its comments. The European Union was also measured. It simply called for India and Pakistan to reopen dialogue, which is again diplomatic speak for India can do whatever they want, we just want to stay out of it. Russia underlined that the changes were carried out within the framework of the Constitution of the Republic of India, which is a pretty fantastic burn, let's be honest. Another great thing about Indian foreign policy has been how India's rise internationally has been so completely different from China's rise. India believes that as it becomes more and more powerful, it will be a net positive for the rest of the world, whereas China's rise is a net negative for the rest of the world. When India got to host the G20, it made the African Union a permanent member of the G20.
The African Union officially took its seat at the table of the world's richest and most powerful countries, commonly known as G20, on Saturday with the approval of all and at the request of summit's host, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
आगे की कार्रवाई शुरू करने से पहले
Before talking any further, I would request the African Union head to take its seat as a permanent G20 member.
India's cumulative investments in Africa stand at $70 billion. The country has extended a line of credit worth $12.26 billion to African countries. 193 projects have been completed and 66 are under execution, while 88 are in pre-execution stage in various sectors in those countries. India has reached out to its neighbors like Nepal in times of need without any strings attached. While the rest of the world was struggling under the pandemic, India was able to distribute vaccines to multiple countries throughout the world, while at the same time undertaking the largest vaccination program in the world. Compare that to China, who uses debt trap diplomacy, where it gives useless debt to countries and traps them when those countries are not able to repay. It happened with Sri Lanka, and when Sri Lanka wasn't able to repay the debt, China was able to commandeer or capture the Hambantota port. Same is being done with other countries, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Kenya, whether it's Zambia, Laos, Mongolia. Many of these countries are falling under China's debt trap diplomacy. China is basically the Nigerian prince email scam of countries. So the obvious question that I asked in the beginning of the video is, what changed? What has caused this increased confidence in India's foreign policy? Well, there's three kinds of confidence. There's obviously a level of confidence that comes from being the fourth largest economy in the world, soon to be the third largest economy in the world. There's a certain degree of confidence that comes from military power. India is the second largest army on earth. But India now also has a third kind of confidence, a civilizational confidence. This is also a very important type of confidence. So you'll notice that despite the untold misery heaped upon the world by Western colonial powers such as the UK, Spain, Portugal, and even the United States, all of these countries are extremely proud of their heritage, of their culture, of their civilization, and their history. India, for 100 years under the colonial thumb, and for 70 years during independence, was taught to hate itself, to hate its culture, to hate its history. But thankfully, since 2015, those things are also changing, albeit slower than I would like. India is rediscovering her civilization. And after rediscovering her civilization, India is rediscovering her history, her culture, and as a result, developing pride in her civilization, her history, and her culture. And that has given India a very important kind of confidence. Now we gift Bhagavad Gitas to our foreign guests.
दो देश के प्रमुख लोग मिलते हैं तो एक दूसरे को गिफ्ट देते हैं. आपको जानकर के खुशी होगी, मैं गिफ्ट देने के लिए गीता ले आया था, भगवद गीता. मैं नहीं जानता हिंदुस्तान में क्या होगा, शायद एक टीवी डिबेट चलेगी इस पर. हमारे सारे सेकुलर मित्र बड़ा तूफान खड़ा कर देंगे. ये मोदी अपने आप में समझता क्या है? गीता लेके गया मतलब उसने उसको भी कम्युनल कर दिया. खैर उनकी भी रोजी रोटी तो चलनी चाहिए और अगर हम नहीं रहे तो कैसे चलेगी। लेकिन पता नहीं आजकल ऐसे ऐसे विषयों पर विवाद करते हैं, लेकिन मेरा कमिटमेंट है, मेरा कन्विक्शन है और मैंने इस निर्णय किया कि मैं दुनिया के किसी महापुरुष को मिलूंगा तो मैं ये दूंगा। और मैंने जापान में आज यहाँ के महाराजा को मिलने गया तो उनको भी मैंने गीता भेंट की। क्योंकि मेरे पास इससे बढ़कर के देने को कुछ नहीं है और दुनिया के पास भी इससे बढ़कर पाने के लिए कुछ।
Emmanuel Macron was gifted a replica of the Ram Mandir by Modi. Modi dresses in Indian clothes rather than Western suits when he visits foreign countries.
And I think it's got a lot to do with the rich heritage and the culture we come from. I mean, you know, we've thousands of years, we've been a country that has produced its own textiles, created its own craft. And we're not talking about a craft only from a city or a state. We've got craft from every state, which is defined by its own ethos, its hierarchy, its community, and that presenting itself. I mean, Prime Minister Modi will need many, many more events to showcase the rest of India. But I must say that he's doing a phenomenal job. Starting 2014 till up until now, it's been quite a heck of a fashion journey, to say the least.
A female Indian minister, Smriti Irani, recently visited one of the holiest sites in Islam, Medina, but did not cover her hair, wore a sari, as well as a bindi and her sindoor. That is a new kind of confidence. That is a confidence that India did not have before. And I think this trend is set to continue, at least for the foreseeable future. India's economy continues to grow. India will soon be the third largest economy in the world. India's military strength continues to improve. India is projected to have strong political stability, as Modi is projected by many polls to come back to power for a third time. The Hindutva resurgence in India and the civilizational renaissance in India continues to go from strength to strength, as after the rebuilding of the Ram Mandir, Indians are loudly demanding the rebuilding of Kashi and Mathura as well. And I think India is well poised to become a major player in an increasingly multipolar world. And I want to ask you, what do you think? Do you think India continues to grow from strength to strength? What are some changes or developments that you would like to see in India's foreign policy? Let me know in the comment section down below. Also guys, if you like today's video, if you'd like to see more explainer videos, let me know in the comments what other topics I should cover. Other than that, I will see you for the next one. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I will see you next time. And to all of you, is secular pranam.